Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Tucked away in the interiors of Telangana is this 800-year-old Ramappa temple, an architectural marvel that's finally found its place on the World Heritage Map. The efforts for the same have been on for at least a decade now. This is probably the only temple in the country that's been named after the chief sculptor Ramappa and not after the local deity or neither after any local traditional place here. It took 40 years for this temple to be built. Today, ThePrint has come to Palampet village where the Ramappa temple is to show you this exquisite craftsmanship as well as the process that's behind that earned the temple a UNESCO heritage tag. This finest example of the medieval Deccan temple was inscripted as a 39th World Heritage Site in India by UNESCO late last week. Ramappa temple, popularly known after its sculptor, is a 13th century temple built during the Kakatiya dynasty ruling between the 12th and 13th centuries, particularly under the rule of Kakatiya king Ganapati Deva in 1213 AD. It took 40 years for the temple construction. The Ramappa temple from an aerial view shows that it stands majestically on a 6 feet high star-shaped foundation. The temple, whose local deity is Lord Shiva, is also known as Rudreshwara temple, named probably after Rechalla Rudra Reddy, who was the chief of the army of the Kakatiyas. The temple was built under Reddy's supervision. Ramappa temple is deep inside the obscure Palampet village. The road to the temple has lush green fields on the either side, painting a picture of the dominating rural habitat in that area. Palampet is situated in Telangana's Mulugu district, which is the least populated district with a majority of them being tribals. This work of a creative genius Ramappa has not just magnificent cultural aspects in the temple but also geotechnical work that helped the temple remain intact for 800 years at least and left many modern experts puzzled. One of the key features of the temple that helped it bag the World Heritage tag is the usage of floating bricks to build the roof to make sure that there is no load on the foundation. The bricks are so light with a density lower than water that they float on water easily. A live demonstration of the same was also given to International Council of Monuments in 2019 in Paris.
And gave a live demonstration while defending Ramappa temple with all the important and outstanding universal values. I also gave a live demonstration of the floating bricks of Ramappa. We have taken 2 glasses of water. In one glass, I put the normal brick with the density of 2.2, it sank. In the other glass, I put our Ramappa temple with a density of 0.9 and it was floating. So I showed them. So this is the brick where the Sikara of Ramappa temple was built by the great Kakatiyas 800 years back, thinking that they should not use the normal brick. If they use the normal brick with density of 2.2, there will be heavy load on the foundations and the structure may undergo settlement and collapse.
Another key feature is the sandbox technology used in the temple, where a certain area would be dug out, filled with sand, and then the structure is built on top of it. The structures conducted on these sandboxes had a robust foundation, and the seismic waves generated due to earthquakes were easily absorbed by the sand, point out experts. It is said that there were earthquakes between 17th and 18th century where the nearby houses collapsed, but the temple stood firm. But as one enters the inner shrine, they can notice how the floor beams have been altered and pillars have sunken into the floor. And despite this settlement, the structure is still strong.
And we have done about 5 years of intensive surveys, which include geophysical surveys like resistivity survey, seismic survey, and then we have also drilled boreholes to establish and collected the core samples and integrated them to assess the subsurface geological conditions. And we have identified the sandbox technology in 1980s, that the Kakatiyas have done an excellent job of constructing the temple on a sandbox technology. The foundation was sandbox. In fact, the same sandbox technology which stood the test of time for 800 years in Ramappa, 1000 years in 1000 Pillar temple, is a testimony to their engineering skills. And I have suggested the same foundation technology of Rama Janmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya. In fact, they were doing on concrete piles. So I went there and I found that they are doing concrete piles of 1 meter dia, 40 meter depth, 1,200 piles. So I have discussed with them and stopped all the concrete work. Why the structure did not fail in spite of the earthquakes that have occurred in the past? Because that is very close to the Godavari Graben, Godavari fault zone. So there were earthquakes. We don't know what their intensity is because there were no seismological observations at that time. So we know there were. In spite of it, the structure has been intact. That's because of the sandbox technology, which they have adopted. It's not only an excellent foundation material, but it's a beautiful shock absorber. It absorbed the vibrations created by these earthquakes and withstood the test of time.
Right.
And then the exuberant carvings of the black dolerite rock, the hardest rock in the world. Right. The architectural splendor, the way in which they have carved, even a fine thread can pass through with mirror-like polish, is another important consideration. And the settlement of the structure, in spite of the settlement, the structure is still intact, talking volumes of their extraordinary factor of safety, which they have visualized 800 years back.
One cannot miss the intricate carvings where each one tells a different story. For instance, there are 526 elephants on the outer walls of the temple, carved right next to each other, but one has to look closely to see that each one is different from the other. The elephants show the way to the inner shrine, and because the elephants played a key role in transportation of huge rocks back in ancient time, the importance was ascertained through these carvings. There are pillars inside the temple whose carvings are so perfect and delicate that even a thread can pass through it easily. The local guide makes sure that he carries a needle or something as delicate equivalent through a thread to show you these intricate carvings. There is a pillar of music in the temple where only a certain part of the stone generates music and the rest of it does not, which is still a mystery. Next to it are carvings of the Kakatiya era dance form Perini, which is now an ancient Telangana dance form. One of the main attractions, also a great source of information, is the basalt pillar with 204 lines engraved on all the four sides. These lines are on the history of the temple, the rulers, and the ministry at that time. In fact, the Palampet village was considered a city back then. There are idols of dancers, tribal ladies on the outer roof with such dainty craftsmanship. For instance, in this particular idol, shadow of the necklace worn by the dancer is shown on her stomach through the carving. Then, in another statue, where a thorn is being removed from the dancer's feet, even the swollen part of the feet is made visible. All these idols are made out of black dolerite rock, one of the hardest rocks in the world. And on the roof of the inner shrine, there are carvings to depict different stories from mythology, starting from Lord Krishna to Ganesha. Another key attraction is the sacred bull calf Nandi, considered to be the gatekeeper of Lord Shiva. And it is built so tricky that it makes tourists feel that the eyes of the Nandi are always watching them, irrespective of wherever they stand in the temple. Every carving in the temple has a different story to tell, and that just adds to the uniqueness of the temple. For instance, look at these steps. This was the original height of the steps across the temple. It was considered that the Kakatiya kings were so tall that they could use these steps with a lot of ease. But ever since the ASI started maintaining the temple and also fixing the damages or also repairs in the temple, they've arranged these temporary steps for a lot of devotees and tourists who have been coming for them to use the temple and get into the temple. The ASI had also fixed a lot of parts in the temple. It was said that in the 17th century, when there was an earthquake in this particular area, the houses and people nearby, the houses particularly nearby, suffered a lot of damage. But the temple did not really encounter that much of a damage. It could withstand the earthquake. For instance, this particular iron latch that you see here to fix this stone to the temple outdoor here, that was also one of the repairs that was done by ASI. One of the crucial crusaders behind this World Heritage Tag is the Kakatiya Heritage Trust, which has been working diligently for the past decade with this as their main objective. The trust, along with the government, have started their efforts as early as 2010. The temple made it to the tentative list in 2016, meaning the nomination would be considered on a temporary basis. Then the Chief Minister Chandrasekhar Rao wrote to Prime Minister Narendra Modi about the same. Following a nomination confirmation from the international body, a team of experts visited the temple in 2019.
We have to restore the structure. We have to protect and preserve the structure. If you want to preserve the structure, the foundation must be very safe. As I was telling you, sandbox technology. As long as the sand is in the box, confined with its maximum density, there is no problem for the superstructure. But by any chance, if sand leaks out and it loses its density, and there will be a differential settlement. So we should ensure in future that the sandbox is completely protected so that there won't be any leakage of sand. And we should not allow groundwater enter into the foundations. They will create some problems. So these are all conservative activities which Kakatiya Heritage Trust will propose, and we will make certain improvements for the monument.
The Archaeological Survey of India and the Heritage Trust have together preserved and repaired parts of the temple. 2 other temples inside the premises are being rebuilt too, and for one of them, the sand used 800 years ago was also preserved. For the 2,000-odd people of the tiny Palampet village, the Heritage Tag is a world-class recognition to the temple and their forgotten village. They now hope that the huge boost in the tourism would improve their lives too. The shop owners close to the temple know that they will have to vacate soon as they are now on the buffer zone of a heritage site.
30 సంవత్సరాలు మాకు వేరే ఏ ప్లేస్ లేదు, ఇదే ప్లేస్ ఉంది మాకు. 30 సంవత్సరాల నుంచి ఇక్కడనే ఉంటాం మేము. అంతేగా అడుగుతామండి మేము. కరెక్ట్ ఆధారం మాకు ఇస్తేనే కదా మేము ఇక్కడి నుంచి వెళ్ళి వెళ్ళిపోతాము. మాకు ఏ ఆధారం లేని మేము ఇక్కడి నుంచి వెళ్ళి వెళ్ళిపోతాం. తర్వాత మాకు ఎలాంటి చూపించారు, మమ్మల్ని ఆదుకోరు.
On an average, the temple has about 1,000 visitors a week and about 4,000 over the weekend, which now the experts expected to shoot up by at least 8 times. It remains to be seen how soon the good days this heritage tag will bring to the village. This is Rishika Sadam for ThePrint from Palampet.